The next speaker is Emily Erbelding, I got it here. And what she's going to talk about is what is the NIAID doing to help grow and retain the medical mycology workforce. So now we're going to be in the government. What are the issues, the grants, the K awards, et cetera, and how are they specific for medical mycology? So Emily?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on this important topic. Some of the themes that I'm going to cover or supplement with the government perspective have already been covered by Dr. Wormley and Dr. So what I'm going to cover today is medical research portfolio that we support at NIAID, and it changes over time. I'm going to specifically talk about the NIAID training grant portfolio, not specific to medical mycology. I'm going to talk a little bit about specific mycology research training, and then I'm going to talk about future training goals for NIAID, particularly with a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And that theme has been, I guess I'm the third speaker now that is talking about that area for the future. So shown on this slide is the NIAID fungal portfolio over the past 10 years. And you can see, so the blue lines, the histograms are in dollar amounts from 2012 to the year that is most complete, fiscal year 2021, and then also the number of projects, which is the RPG count in the green line. So the NIH budget has grown considerably since 2012. I think in 2012, NIH as a whole got about $30 billion in appropriated funds, and that's grown in fiscal year 21 to about $46 billion, so about a 50% doubling. But it's difficult to compare whether the pace of fungal research has been consistent with that NIH growth overall, because so much of the NIH appropriations over the past several years have been for earmarks. So the BRAIN initiative, for example, committed entirely to dementia and causal factors there. Fungal research really isn't eligible for that, or there's no overlap yet. In NIAID specifically, some of our largest earmarks in DMID are for developing a universal influenza vaccine and for antimicrobial resistance. That's a very large earmark of over $400 million right now. So not so much overlap with fungal research. So I think you can say from the increasing projects and the increasing dollar amounts, which seem to outpace growth of the appropriated budget overall, that fungal research is on pace to grow. It has grown over the past 10 years. Specifically, what is the budget for training? Most of our training portfolio goes into T grants, which are the institutional training grants, Ks, which are career development awards, usually to individuals, and then Fs, which are smaller grants, again, to individuals, either predoctoral or doctoral training for specific research projects. And you can see that we're also growing here, although not so much. We recognized back about 10 years ago in the era where the congressional debates were over deficit spending and putting a halt to that, and something called sequestration, which was that every dollar for increase in non-defense spending had to be offset somehow. We had a lot of debate at the NIAID level, and I think Dr. Wormley sort of referred back to this period where the pay line was 7% or 8% sometimes overall for R01s at NIAID. There was a lot of debate about how much money should we be putting into training, because what are we training these people for if they can't get an R01? But now we're in a different era, and it seems as though Congress favors, in a bipartisan way, increases to the NIH budget. So our goal is to commit more to these specific categories of training, the Ts, the Ks, and the Fs, over the next several years. I will just say that there are additional supplemental ways that we support training, which I'll go into in future slides. I'll also note that there are some training within other types of very large cooperative team science grants that occur, such as some of our leadership group grants. The AIDS clinical trial grants, for example, sometimes have training as a trialist embedded into the protocol development and embedded into the opportunities for for that funding, similarly with our antimicrobial resistance leadership group and our IDCRCs, which encompass the VTUs, the Vaccine Treatment Evaluation Units that DMID funds. There are specific opportunities for training as a clinical trialist, and that is not reflected in our training budget. It would be more in our research our research budget overall. So just depicted on this slide are the training portfolio, the specific activity codes, the specific Fs and Ks and Ts, as they support either people that are getting a doctoral degree or have gotten one and progress towards becoming an independent investigator, and where those very specific types of support fall along the career path. For MDs, for people in clinical training, which is largely MDs, or people that have gotten their PhDs. So you can see that there's a lot of commonalities, but there's some differences. The Ks that individuals are eligible for differ by what type of degree they had for the most part. The benchmark that we tend to use as a mark of success is whether or not an individual who got a K, for example, who was supported by that for a number of years in their postdoctoral career, whether they went on to get an R01. And that's sort of what we consider a benchmark of success for a training program. It's not a perfect measure, but it's what we tend to track and follow. I'll just mention that because we recognize that that's such a difficult part of a person's career, you might know this, but the individuals who are applying for their first R01, the new investigators or early stage investigators, get a 4-point benefit of the pay line. So if the pay line is set at 12th percentile, for example, new investigators who've not previously gotten an NIH R01 previously would get funded at the 16th percentile if they happen to get that in their submission. In addition to the T's, F's, and K's that support individuals at various stages in training as laid out on this slide, we also have diversity supplements and loan repayment programs that individuals can apply for that also we consider part of our training portfolio. We also have specialized training programs that are listed here. A lot of these are probably undersubscribed. We advertise them on our websites. For example, there are opportunities that the Office of Research in Women's Health has to support earlier career investigators, and program officers try to let potential investigators know of those opportunities when applications that they submit might meet the criteria. But some of these are not particularly well subscribed, and we're always interested in ways of making investigators, institutions, people that might benefit from these programs more aware of how to apply for them and the fact that they're out there and they're available. And then there are supplement programs too for very particular specific situations or very specific individuals. And some of these too are, relatively speaking, undersubscribed, we think. So diversity supplements are available for PIs who want to support an individual in a specific project through high school all the way through junior faculty. There's primary caregiver technical assistance grants available, for example, for postdocs who might have either been pregnant and had to leave the lab for a period of time, or might have been a primary caregiver due to another situation. And basically, this is a means of support for like the equivalent of a technician's salary for the period of time that person was out because they were a primary caregiver for family situations. So all these very particular circumstances, these grants to help people in very particular circumstances to prevent them from dropping out of the scientific workforce are there for people who are eligible, and we encourage you to take a look at these and help plug this type of support into situations in your lab or in your institution where people might benefit from them. So I said I would talk just specifically about medical mycology research training, and I just wanted to call out one particular institutional training grant that's been continuously active since 2003. This is the Tri-Institutional Molecular Mycology and Pathogenesis Training Program. That the administrative institution is Duke, but it does support researchers in training throughout the Research Triangle area, so 3 different academic institutions there. It has been successful since 2003 and being continuously funded, and also training individuals who are successful and went on to leadership positions in medical mycology. I'll just note that there really aren't, we looked at the training portfolio, there's definitely T32 grants that have areas of emphasis, none of them that I could find encompassed an entire kingdom of within microbiology. There are, global health, tropical medicine areas of emphasis within T32s. There's some that focus a little bit more on sexually transmitted infections, for example, but this was fairly unique, and it's been highly successful for going on 20 years. So now I'm going to shift and start talking about something that we're focused on more and more at NIAID in the past year, diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. And you heard parts of this, in Dr. Amelia's presentation on the ID workforce and getting people into infectious diseases, and then also Dr. Wormley's presentation on seeing yourself represented in the leadership in science at your institution, for example, the fact that the graduate student applicant pool is increasingly diverse and more underrepresented minorities are part of that. We recognize that we, both in people that are employed at NIH and the extramural workforce that we fund at NIAID and through other institutes at NIH, we need to think about how they can be competitive. It's a competitive world out there with, we're competing for people going into other more lucrative professions, for example, and we need to make sure that the workforce is welcome, that the institutions are welcoming and support this increasingly diverse workforce in a way that allows them to make their best professional contributions and stay in science and be successful. So, depicted on this slide is the NIH workforce. And you'll note perhaps that it's 55% white, for example, which isn't so far off from the US as a whole. 3.9% Hispanic or Latino is actually low compared to the US population as a whole, but some of these statistics are difficult because we don't actually have data on how people see themselves and checking a box in a survey, for example, which is really the correct way to get at race and ethnicity in a population sample. And you can see that being Black or African American represented at about 20%, that actually exceeds a little bit the US population as a whole, the census statistics. But you can see that when you break this down by scientific occupations, those are individuals who might be on a path towards being a science executive at NIH, who might be Tony Fauci's replacement in upcoming years, for example, leadership positions and independent investigators in the intramural program. You can see that the majority, 60%, are white, and you can see that Black or African American is really relatively low, certainly lower than even their representation in the graduate student matriculating as graduate students for degrees in the current US situation. So you can see then that infrastructure operations, though, are where Black or African Americans are better represented. So you can see that there's more representation, there's less representation than we would like, there's less diversity than we would like in scientific occupations, which might be the professional designations within the NIH that might lead to leadership positions. So we clearly have more work to do in that area. We clearly need to think about how our workforce, our human capital, the people that we hire can be the best in this increasingly diverse group of people that are now that are graduating from scientific programs and graduate school and have the capability to be there, to be in the NIH workforce. We need to think about how we can compete and how we can support them in being their best professionally in our workforce. So we're thinking about that both in the intramural workforce, the scientists at NIH that are funded that do intramural laboratory investigation. We're thinking about our extramural program workforce, which manages the funds of many of you. And then we're also thinking about how we can support programs that the extramural community, the community of scientists, that also needs to be more competitive in this increasingly diverse in an increasingly diverse workforce, how we can support them. So this is just one single funding opportunity announcement that was presented for concept clearance at last council round, May Council of 2022, and passed, so it will become a funding opportunity announcement published within several months. This is to support independent research projects in the NIAID mission areas for new early stage and at-risk investigators from diverse backgrounds. The diverse backgrounds are described in the notice that is referenced there, not only individuals from historically underrepresented backgrounds, but also people that might have been disadvantaged in their early life in some way, qualified for food stamps, might have been the first person in their might not have had parents that graduated from college, might have been in the foster care system. All of those are individuals who might benefit and might be eligible for this type of support. So we continue to look at what our extramural programs need in order to be more competitive in an increasingly diverse world. And we also, so we'll continue to examine the needs and publish more funding opportunity announcements that might address those gaps in years to come. So I mentioned a lot of training resources, the F's, the K's, and the T's that confuse a lot of people who don't work in this area all the time. There are web-based guides to who is eligible for what that you should check out. You can also, there's an email address listed on this. We do have resources if you'd like to ask questions about eligibility and best strategies. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussions on this.